Hey, everybody out there in podcast land. This is Tim, and we're here with
David. I'm here too.
I'm glad. I thought for a moment you might be possessed by a demon.
It could have been, but no, I fought it off strongly.
Anyway, aside from our crazy introduction, this is Johnny Has the Keys podcast, and you probably know us if you've been listening to us. We like to discuss different illusions and parallels within the genres of horror and science fiction. And today we've got a very special episode. You want to tell us about it?
Yes, definitely.
Dave?
It's going to be the seminal horror movie of all time, probably, by William Peter Blatty and William Friedkin. Do you want the synopsis now, or do we want to say what's happening or what's up?
You know what? We are just totally off the rails. We can talk a little bit about what's going on. I did have a couple of things that I had noticed this week, and then we'll jump back into the episode.
Sure. What'd you notice?
What'd
you notice?
One thing I noticed that kind of surprised me on the Walking Dead finale, the one where they tried to cross over into Game of Thrones territory with snow and frozen zombies. I don't know if you happen to catch that.
No.
Greg Nicotero likes to pay homage to iconic zombies or movies from the past. And I saw a zombie in this finale that I was like, oh my God, I know that zombie. And I was so hopeful.
You know the zombie?
Yes, it was the zombie female torso thing from Return of the Living Dead. The one that comes through the window and bites the guy's head. Now, we are talking about a movie, a spinoff of Night of the Living Dead that John Russo did that was kind of a horror comedy in the late 80s. And there was, and the zombies talked and they only ate brains, so it had a little bit of a twist.
Brains.
And yeah, this woman, later on they strap her on a table and she's like, "We're hungry from the pain of being dead." And she was this really creepy puppet zombie. They had her in this episode. She was lying on the ground moving. And I was like, oh my God, I know that zombie. And no one...
Oh my God, zombie recognition.
Yeah, no one on Talking Dead said a word about it. I was like, where's Greg Nicotero? Why are they not talking about this? So I went on Google and I Googled it, and sure enough, he mentions it. He said, yeah, I did this on purpose. So I was like, I'm not crazy. I had to tell Dennis, I know what I'm talking about.
So. I recognize that zombie. It's a personal friend of mine. I know that one.
Yeah.
It's so weird you mentioned that. I actually watched that movie about 3 weeks ago. For some reason, I had a wild hair. I guess I was doing the whole Netflix surf for an hour before you ever pick anything thing.
Do you want a party?
Yeah, well, it had Linnea Quigley in it. Yeah. So, and she's like naked as a jaybird, which is fine, dancing in a cemetery, which was
yeah,
good.
She does like an erotic striptease in the cemetery, which is kind of an interesting concept. Yeah.
And their boss is Clu Gulager, Gallagher,
and James their boss. Karen. James Karen is his.
James Karen, he's got that stuff all over you, Bert. Get it off me, man. It's just
shut your mouth if you like this job.
Yeah.
We could easily do a podcast on that movie because I love that movie.
And I think I've told you, I've been slowly in my spare time catching up on all my CSI. I've been rewatching the entire series of CSI because I really liked it. And one of my favorite characters in is Lady Heather, who is this recurring character. She's in like once a season, and she and Gil Grissom kind of had a thing, but she's like the madam of this BDSM house in Vegas. And I really like the actress playing her, and it's really cool. And I found out just looking her up online, she's the lead in the third Return of the Living Dead. The one with the... It's the one where she actually takes razor blades and puts them in her hands for like claws.
I've at least seen pictures, yeah. She's got a lot of piercings, right?
Yes. Yeah, she's like a punk rocker alternative girl who gets zombied, but she's more like the Oh, I'm not totally zombie
I mean,
yet. I'm like,
I'm your anti-hero.
what's the one in? Yeah, what's the one on Dawn of the Dead? What's Bert or Bub or
Bub.
Bud
We
or
call him Bub.
Bub? Bub. Yeah. Anyway, so ironically, it's interesting you mentioned that because I watched that again. That was kind of
Yeah, I
cool.
pull that one and Reanimator out quite often, at least every other year, because those are two of my
Oh,
favorites.
I've watched
Yeah,
Reanimator in
and that's
forever.
another one I would not mind doing a
Yeah.
podcast too. There's some great moments in that movie.
Yeah, yeah. That would we have to add that one to the
Hmm.
list. Yeah. So if any of our listeners out there want us to do that one, get in touch with us. Let us know. We'll probably do Reanimator.
Hmm.
Okay. Well, as for me, I wanted to share this with you.
Sure.
So I know you were a podcast listener long before I was, and that's kind of what prompted us to begin this podcast in the first place. Um, but so this past week, I said, okay, I'm going to dive in and I'm going to listen to a bunch of different podcasts. I'm going to try to get some research instead of researching the movie so much because I know it pretty well because I love this particular movie. I'm going to research podcasts in general.
On the same subject? Oh,
No,
okay.
on different subjects. Yeah, I didn't listen to this one. I listened to other things, but all genre related.
Okay.
So either they're movies, movie reviewers, horror, science fiction, that sort of
And we're the
thing.
best, right?
Um, well, yes, of course. But I did have some observations. So not necessarily that we should even consider these, but observations that I've noticed in all of them. Literally in all but like one of the ones I listened to. Um, you should have a girl, no matter what the grouping is. If it's three, four, two, nine, one guy, whatever, you should also have a girl. She should have like a sound like she's really cute and have a really cute laugh, but also be very
Intelligent,
intelligent.
yeah.
She can't be.
I
She
have
has to be very
I have
intelligent.
picked up on that trope, Mr. Horton. That's
Yes,
hilarious.
and it's there all the time. And there are some podcasts where they'll just let her
Yeah.
talk for like a freaking hour, and they'll occasionally do something like, "Yeah, she's right, man,"
Uh-huh. And don't you
But
think that she's
so
probably cute but wears glasses? That would be my guess too.
uh, yeah, I
Yeah.
would I would think that's right. Yes, I could picture that in some of them.
I'll
So
leave
yeah,
that
have
to
a
you.
girl. Uh, you use British accent because that seems to give you gravitas and power. If you're suddenly speaking with a British accent, no matter what you're talking about, then you're obviously smarter than everybody else. It just was very odd that I heard that in a lot of them.
You talking
Um,
fake ones?
have a guest. No, I mean, well, some of these were actually. I'm sure most of these were genuine
Okay.
British, but there were a lot of genre British reviewers out there, so it was interesting. Um, always have a guest, even if they don't say anything or don't contribute at all. But you point them out and you talk to him and you go say, "Hey, Bob, Bob's here. He's our high school valedictorian is joining us this week in the basement. Da, da, da. Hey, Bob." And Bob goes, "Hey."
So
And then they go talking for an hour
it's Wayne's
and
World. You
Bob
were
basically
describing
says,
Wayne's World.
"Yeah, it's exactly Wayne's World. It's that kind of feel." And there's, like this one I listened to, they were really good. I mean, they were very informative about the movie, but they kept saying where they're from. That was another thing too. Always talk about where you're from and your past. So one was they were always talking about, we live in Oklahoma and here we're near Tulsa and I'm debating about moving over here in this other apartment complex. I'm like, I don't have a map of Tulsa in front of me. That doesn't help me at all. I really don't care. But it was, but they had kept having I listened to three of their episodes. They had three different guests on there, but they're basically, I guess, people from town they just picked up or
That's the dude that
an
has
old high
weed
school
that
teacher.
week.
Yeah.
We've got Johnny, my old college roommate, here because he's got the weed. He scored.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whatever.
You've got to stop at least twice and advertise or
Oh,
publicize
I hate
something.
that.
It could be your Patreon page, or it could be, oh, you're going to appear at, DecimaCon 9 this weekend in, downtown at the flower shop or whatever. But you have to stop all the action and do that.
No, I swear,
Um,
listeners, we will probably have to do that at some point. But if we do, it will be at the beginning or the end. It will not be in the middle.
that's a truth
Yeah.
there. Yes. You have to have something break down and talk about it. That was interesting because it was almost in, not in every episode, but every podcast I listened to, one of the episodes they talked about it like, well, this is the second time we're recording this episode because our microphone's totally crapped out, or da da da, or we're in a new studio, so please bear with us. You may hear some dogs barking or whatever, you know. But they always talk about inadequacies, I guess, or problems with the podcast, you
Yeah.
know. We don't do that.
No, I worry about sound though. I do worry about it sometimes. I don't want to sound like we're recording in a
Well,
basement. I don't want to be Wayne's World.
well,
But
that's because you sound odd,
do
Tim.
I?
Is why. It's the whole
What if
thing.
I clicked my
Yeah.
pen? Would you like me to click my pen, David?
No, please don't click your pen. No pen clicking. Uh, but and then the last thing was you have to get stuff wrong because I guess the geek in me just can't handle it. But when they start reviewing something or talking about something and they get either names wrong and don't apologize for it, they don't say, you know, The Exorcist was directed by Steve Friedkin and da 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 da, and they keep going, and I go,
Oh, I thought it
no,
was
it
John
wasn't. No, it
Hughes.
wasn't. Yeah, I'm not going to listen to you if you're talking about Steve Friedkin because he doesn't exist. So I don't, you know. Actually, there's probably a Steve Friedkin out there listening. I'm sorry, Steve.
Yeah.
But with regards to this particular, you know, whatever they're talking about, if they get stuff wrong, they start losing credibility to me. And it's not that we're the experts. I'm not saying that either,
No, I mean,
or
there's
that we're
many
always
times when we're
perfect.
like looking things up rapidly on IMDb because we don't want to get them wrong. Yeah.
Right, right. I think that's you know, if the intent is there and you actually say, oh, I can't remember their name right now, but they were so and so, and they were really good. You know, that to me is more acceptable than, well, yeah, that was Sally Boutron, and you're going, no, it wasn't. I know Sally, and she wasn't in that movie, or whatever, you know, kind of thing. Anyway, that was my podcast 101 observance for the week, as I deep dived into about 14 episodes of
Well,
podcasts,
that's
and some of them
that's
really
really cool. I'm
were
glad
not
you've been
good.
doing your research. And folks, if you didn't catch the message there, it means that we are genuine. We have integrity, but we are not afraid to say "bite me." So,
Yes. See, I love the way Tim just distills it down to the bare
yeah, let's
essence,
break it down.
which is great.
Distill it.
So, okay. So after that, what have we been up to? You had asked me what movie we're reviewing. We're reviewing one of my favorite movies of all time. It's probably in my top 10, which you've known about.
Mhm.
It is my second. Oh no, it's hard to say. No, it's in my top 5 horror movies of all time, definitely.
Okay, I can see
Um,
that.
but basically, it's a simplistic story. It's basically the story of an actress whose daughter, Chris McNeil, she has a daughter named Regan, who's 12 years old, and they're shooting a movie in Georgetown and living there while they film this movie. And Regan begins acting oddly and strangely, and Chris employs every method she can to find out what's wrong with her daughter, from medicine to psychiatrist to psychologist to finally breaking down because it is Georgetown, which is a huge Jesuit sort of community. She ends up, at the suggestion of actually doctors or psychiatrists, she ends up going to an actual exorcist. And the exorcist has to first prove that he can perform the exorcism. He has to have evidence that he can take to the Catholic Church and then do it. So he gets a young Father Karras who is having a crisis of faith. And he gets a superior priest who has performed exorcisms in the past, and they agree to exorcise this demon that's inside of this 12-year-old girl. And it gets very frightening from there, and very scary and very crazy. And at the very end has a little bit of a twist ending, but there are people that die and people that suffer, and it's an incredibly, incredibly scary horror movie.
Hmm.
Does that about sum it up, you think?
Is that about something? Yeah, it actually it
Sort
does
of?
sum it up. And
Huh.
I would like to add that one of the reasons why it may be in my favorites too is I have an affinity for small movies and small books with just handful of characters in a very limited setting. And this movie is that.
Mm.
I
Mm-hmm.
mean, the book, that will hopefully see the light of publication this year that I wrote, Will to Live, is the same
Mm-hmm.
thing. It is basically one character in a house in an empty neighborhood. And this is,
Yes,
you know,
and it's great.
several characters in, I guess you would call it a rented house in Georgetown, DC.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at the cast of this, there's like 8 people really in
Hmm.
the main cast, if you don't count an occasional doctor who has one scene, kind of thing. And it is a very intimate space. I think we'll get to that when we talk about the production, but very localized terror kind of thing. What was what's your experience in the past with this movie? Like, did you read the book before the movie? When was the first time you read the book? When's the
No,
first time you saw the movie?
this is one of those cases where I've never read the book. I have it. I just have not ever gotten around to it. When I was a kid, my mother used to let me read scary stuff at an early age. I read Jaws when it came out, and I was
Mm-hmm.
probably
Mm-hmm.
10 or less. But The Exorcist came out a few years early. It came out in 71, so I would have only been about 6 years old. I don't think she would have let me read The Exorcist at 6. But and it was also one of those movies where I'm sure the rumors got out about the masturbation scene and the obscenities. So that was also a reason she probably never let me see that movie. So I didn't see that movie until we were, you know what? I saw it in the late 70s when it was edited for television. That's when I saw it. I guarantee it. And
Mm.
that would have been my
Okay.
first, and it still scared the shit out of me. But and then I
Mm-hmm.
probably saw the original version when you and I were hanging out watching videotapes, those big clunky monstrosities. And then
VHS.
in the 90s when, you know, all the extra footage came out, I saw that stuff as well with the DVD release. So,
Right. The extended cut
mhm,
and all that. Yeah.
mhm. So
Yeah.
that's my history with the
Um,
film. No, no, no novel.
mine and some of this, mine, because I will say that The Exorcist still to date is the scariest movie experience I've ever had, ever. Because I was like you, I was not allowed to see the movie or read the book or any of that. I snuck and read the book.
Uh-huh.
I actually bought it was at a used bookstore, but it was before the movie came out, but it was a used copy. I got the book with the purple cover.
Uh-huh.
So I think it was the first
It's got the
printing of the
distorted
paperback.
face on it. Yeah.
Yeah, 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 yeah. And the purple
Hmm.
cover before they gave it the font and everything, or the image from the
Hmm.
movie. And read it and was really creeped out by it. It was just, I had a very, strong father being an evangelist upbringing, and that was the book really struck a nerve. So it was already scary to me, but I didn't get to see the release when it came out. A lot of hype about it, and that just intensified the fact, my father saying, "No, you will never ever watch that
Yeah.
movie. No, it's demon and everything else."
Well,
So,
and you heard what Billy Graham
but
said. I
but
don't know if you have that in your notes.
I do. Yes. What? You go
Well,
ahead.
no, Billy Graham was going around telling people that there was actual demons within the celluloid of the film.
Mm-hmm.
Basically saying
Yeah,
if you
that
go
it
see
was,
this movie, you're evil too, or whatever. I don't know, some bullshit.
or you'll be consumed by evil, or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was just, yeah, yeah. Well, anyway, that was the general feeling. But in '79, they had a re-release of it. I think it was right around the same time that they had the television of it, but they actually re-released it in theaters, and it came to the Volunteer Twin
Nice.
in my hometown, and
I can't tell you how many movies I've seen there.
yeah. Well, I decided, okay, I'm going to go see that movie. I'm not going to tell anybody because I don't want my mom to find out. So I'm going to go see it. Da da da. So I went to like a Wednesday night when everybody else would be in church. No, I went to a Wednesday night, 9 p.m. showing, the last showing that night. And I came in, and got my ticket and got my popcorn and went in, sat down, and a few minutes passed and the trailers start and everything else. And I look around and there's not anybody else in the theater but me.
That's awesome.
And I went, okay. And those opening credits started with that chilly chilling kind of sound effects, and then it went to all that Iraqi sounding,
Yeah.
with the, and I was already getting creeped out. And I sat in that theater terrified for a good 2 hours. It scared the living crap out of me. I was devastated for days after that. I wasn't as bad as other people, that we'll talk about from the reactions to it. The fainting and running out and all of that. But it definitely had an effect to this day on me. Watching it again, I was going, I still get chills. This is a scary, scary movie.
Hmm.
But it made such an impression on me. It made two other final things personal to me. The makeup I loved. And even at that time, back in high school and everything else, I liked playing with makeup or wanting to do makeup, and said, "Oh, one day I'm going to make makeup in movies." And this, of course, was one of the greatest makeup artists ever, because Dick Smith is just a genius.
Two.
He in what he
Yeah,
did,
because Rick Baker
and
joined him on that movie too. So really, two
yeah,
iconic makeup people involved.
and Smith was so influential. I went out and had to buy it through the catalogs, no online, by the way, through catalog, but bought his makeup
God,
kit.
we're old.
I still have sections of his makeup kit because it came with these tray molds that you could make scars and bullet holes and bruises and cuts and all of this. And you filled it with, gelatin or the makeup or latex or whatever and made the molds out of it. I still have some of those. I loved that makeup
Mhm.
kit. And my last one was, I actually, that same year, because it was over the summer that I saw that same year, I auditioned or tried out, I guess you would say, for drum major to Tubular Bells. That was the piece I used to try out for drum major and got it. So there you go. The Exorcist helped me become a drum major.
I bet you no one has ever said that.
That's probably
That is
true.
a
I don't think that's
landmark
probably.
declaration.
See, now we're so unique and different, isn't it great? But okay, so overall, what's your general reaction to the movie? I've told you it's the scariest movie I've ever seen. What about you? Did you?
I do think it is a very scary movie. I can totally relate with why people reacted the way they did. I mean, some of it was hype, obviously, people running out of theaters and vomiting or whatever. But a lot of it is just supreme direction.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You and I have talked about this in the past. It's not the special effects so much that are what make the film scary. It's seeing that closed door and knowing what's behind it, or
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
seeing that someone going up those stairs and knowing what they're about to encounter. It's the suspense. Um, there's very little music in the movie. I don't know if you noticed that.
Correct.
I think the main theme, Tubular Bells, was played like 4 times. So it's just
I think it's only played twice, and one of those is in the credits.
right. And
Yeah, the last scene.
you're not getting the John Carpenter suspense with the music build. It's a different kind of suspense, more organic and less generated for like. Well, no, I take that back. That's not true. It's generated from a visual aspect more than an audio aspect. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but I kind of disagree. I think it's very oral. I think that oral, as they say, I think this is the sound design ended up winning an Oscar, by the way.
Right.
I had forgotten that, but it deserved it. It's so, like, the music is only used in transitions. You never have music during a scene because he wanted the scenes to be very raw feeling, like you're really there, kind of, because Friedkin was a documentarian, or documentarian. Um, but the audio and the sound editing in this are so incredible. The one that really sticks out just immediately to me is when Marin first arrives and she opens the door and he says, Mrs. McNeil, and she goes, Father, you hear the breathing, you hear the
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
upstairs through a closed door in her room. But we hear it downstairs at the front door because he wants that. Oh my gosh, we're already nervous. We're already there.
Right.
You know.
And I
So I think it's
agree.
both. I
Yeah,
think
it
it's both
is.
visual and oral.
No, you're absolutely
Um,
right. I was speaking to music in general. I wasn't speaking to the. I would have included that more in effects. But yeah,
oh, okay, yeah,
yeah,
I agree with you. Yeah, I do think he's used the music very sparingly. As a matter of fact, in this watch, I was surprised at how little Tubular Bells is actually used.
right.
And I was going, oh, okay, so this became a huge theme song, but not by usage in the movie. I mean, where it was used.
Mm-mm. No,
So,
it's like you said. It's only used a couple times, and in really good placement where they do it.
yeah, yeah. Um, and it had a huge follow. It was very, very well received. I mean, there were lines and lines and lines out the door when they released this movie.
I have some
Um,
history on this if you want to
yeah,
know.
you do it.
Um, it's it's Warner Brothers' highest grossing of all time if you adjust for inflation.
Hmm.
It is the highest rated R-rated movie of all time, and it is the ninth highest movie of all time if you adjust
Right.
for inflation. So
Yeah, it's
it's
almost 2 billion or something, right? That
right.
it's garnered just if you adjusted.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And I mean, for an R-rated movies, don't always get that high up because of the
Yeah.
fact that their audience is limited.
Well, and we've on this podcast we've done Silence. Silence actually won the Oscar for horror as a horror movie for Best Picture, but this was the first horror movie ever nominated for Best
Correct.
Picture. Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah, yeah.
and we
Okay.
mentioned in a past episode that we didn't think Jaws was nominated, but we were wrong. It was nominated. Um,
For Best Picture?
yeah. I
Hmm.
mean, this
Okay.
was the first, then Jaws,
Mm-hmm. Then
then Silence, then Sixth Sense, then Get Out, and
okay.
the only one that has won is Silence. Those are
And it
like
swept
five
everything.
major horror movies that were nominated for Best Picture.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's have you seen Get Out, by the way?
I
Tangent.
have
But have you
not. I
seen it?
really want to though.
Oh, dude, you need to see it.
Yeah.
You do. Yeah, it's right up your alley there.
Okay.
But yeah, the movie's very profitable, and I think to your point, part of I think its popularity was the hype. I mean, the book had been very popular, but I think Warner's distributed it very sparingly at first to kind of generate a hype to it. And then I read stuff about like, theaters would hire ambulances and have them on standby,
Mm-hmm.
and stuff like that. So I think there was a little bit of that. Who was the guy in the 50s? Nick Castle or Rick Castle? William Castle?
William
William
Castle.
Castle.
Yeah.
Um, so I think there was some hype around it, but there's also stories of, I mean, people who were, trying to sue Warner's for psychological scars and everything else. And I'm
Yeah.
sure it did have a lot of impact on people at the time. I keep trying to, in '79, it had a huge effect on me. So I'm thinking, what about 5 or 6 years earlier when it came out in '73,
Nobody had
before
ever
Jaws?
seen anything like it. I
No,
mean, it
no.
started a subgenre of films. I mean, we'll get to the keys later, but there are a billion of them now
Mm-hmm.
because of
Mm-hmm.
this movie. Back to what you said about the paramedics. There was all the hype about hysterics and fainting, but I watched a documentary where William Friedkin said one of his most eye-opening experiences was seeing the people come out of the theater and just stand there for like an hour talking because they
Mm-hmm.
were trying to process it. They had all just gone through like this weird, similar, same experience with the film.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you and I have talked about, when you go see movies, sometimes you want to shake it off, or whatever, and then you get home and
Yep.
you're by yourself and you start thinking about it again. So that's what
A
these
zombie could
people.
come through that window.
Right,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah, yeah,
So, yeah, I thought that was interesting because you said something about psychological effects or people being
yeah. Well,
damaged. But I mean, I think that
um,
was, a moment of therapy or whatever that he was describing.
of course, yeah. I
Mhm.
think that catharsis of being able to share it, and I know I probably would have felt better had there been somebody to talk to right after that
Hmm.
movie. Um,
By
because
yourself.
I've got in my notes, yeah, William Peter Blatty actually called it. He said it's not a horror movie; it's a theological thriller,
Hmm.
which I thought was interesting because um, he didn't. I don't think either one of them approached it as a total like a horror movie because I think, to your point, it redefined horror movies. Horror movies up to this point were some external creepy awful terrible thing like a zombie or a bug-eyed monster or a Frankenstein's monster, these classic kind of tropes. And now you had something that was a 12-year-old girl in your living room or in her
Hmm.
bedroom. And I think that freaked people out. We talked, I think, during silence about the realism of the movie is what made it so scary, and I think this applies even more here. I'm curious to see some reactions from modern people who watch it because it's not paced like a modern movie. It's paced extremely slow and methodical and straightforward, and you leave it remembering all these horrific things that happened, but most of those are in the last like 30 minutes.
Hmm. I'm paraphrasing here, but Friedkin also said something about when he realized the seriousness of the subject matter or the history, he realized that he had more than a horror movie in his hands and that he wanted to
Mm-hmm.
treat it realistically because he said the power would be in that, treating it realistically. And he's
Yeah.
very smart to perceive that.
Well, and I've got in my notes about the research they did. Blatty. Well, I guess in retrospect, we should start out by saying supposedly this is based on a real actual exorcism that took place in 1949.
Not too far
And
away in Silver Spring, Maryland. Um,
right, and Blatty actually used that as inspiration, but he spent a year with a Catholic priest before he wrote the novel. He spent a year researching it with him and going through it and going through scene work with an actual Catholic priest who supported it, who said, "Yes, I think you're writing a good, piece or a good work of literature."
mhm.
Um, and then Friedkin actually got, when he was hired, he actually got access to all of the records of the 49 exorcisms. So he got all the priests' diaries and all the doctors and nurses' diaries and read through all that. And I think that's part of what made him think needs to be a realistic story. I need to
Uh-huh.
tell. This doesn't need to be treated like a fantasy with overblown orchestral music and all that. This needs to be real to these people to
Yeah.
make the message that he wanted.
For anyone out there that wants to look into this, it was in 1949 Silver Spring. It involved a father, Bodern, and a child or young male named Ronald Doe. There's
Yeah,
there's not a lot out there that I could find readily, but according to Friedkin, it's out there. You can find it if you're
yeah, and it
interested.
was it was a boy. So
Hmm.
Blatty changed it to a girl, which again, smart.
Hmm.
Uh, Side tangent. It'll be curious to see how the new Pet Cemetery fares with that kind of gender change.
Hmm.
Should be interesting to see what they do with it because they do the same thing. They change it to the girl rather than the little boy.
Yeah,
Um,
I don't know about that. We'll talk about that later.
uh, but I mean, I don't think any other horror movie really, because even I can't remember right now. I may be wrong, but I don't know how many nominations either Jaws or Silence got. But
Silence
you
got the
know,
top five for sure.
well, the Exorcist got 10 nominations.
Hmm.
Now, I don't mean just awards; they only won two because
Right.
they won. They won a best Oscar for Blatty for screenplay and then for best sound.
Yeah, there was a
Um,
controversy because Linda Blair's voice wasn't used. They had another actress do the demon voice, and they said that kind of,
Mercedes McCambridge.
yeah, they said there was a little bit of a stigma with that, and they knew that she probably wasn't going to win because of it.
Yeah, but she did win the Golden Globe.
Oh,
She
well,
did
that's
win a
cool.
Golden Globe for Best Actress because they were nominated for 7 Golden Globes and won 4. So, I mean, it is probably the most recognized, I mean, most awarded as far as nominations go. I'd have to look that up, but I think it beat Silence as far as overall nominations. Silence won all 5
Hmm.
of the top categories, and I think the first one of only like 3 or 5 movies in history to do that.
Hmm.
But I don't think it was nominated for as many as The Exorcist. It was really a popular movie.
Yeah, if I think about it in the blog, I'll look up the actual nominations of these 5 films and the wins and stuff.
Yeah,
I could
yeah.
put that,
Um,
document that. You were talking, we talked earlier about Billy Graham saying the movie itself was evil if you go see
yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Did you
Yeah,
know that they had to hire bodyguards for Linda Blair because of religious zealots saying that it glorified Satan?
yeah. Warner Brothers had to pay for those.
Isn't that
Yeah,
crazy? Man,
yeah.
people are
And
just
it's so
nuts.
interesting because like Father Dyer in the movie is a real father. He's a real Catholic Jesuit priest,
Yeah, he's not
and
the only
he's
one.
in the movie.
Yeah.
And then they also had an advisor on set who was another Catholic priest. I mean, so it's very grounded, I guess, in literature or in liturgy,
Hmm.
so to speak. But for Billy Graham, and that's ironically that's who my dad was an evangelist for, was the Billy Graham, crusades and everything,
And my dad liked him
and
too.
um, and for him to come out and say that when it's not like it was endorsed by the church, but I think the church had no problem with it. As a matter of fact, one of the interviews that I read with one of the priests was that he actually thought it would do good. It would cause attention. It would call attention to. I guess it's sorry. It's almost like that Catholic mentality. Let's scare them so they'll run back to church. That's what we need to do.
It's the
So
guilt.
yeah, yeah, but very well received. I mean, I think there were some. I've got in my notes. There were some issues. There were certain cities that said that the R rating was wrong, and they even gave it an X rating themselves, or kind of said, encouraged people not to go see it. One of those was even DC, who said, "Don't go see this movie. It should be X rated." Someplace in probably Georgia or Alabama, I think I can't remember which, but
I'm
did the same
sure.
thing.
Probably the entire South.
But and the British Film Commission, same thing. They said it was. They objected to it when it first came out, but nothing bad. But then when it came out for home distribution, like for VHS and everything, they wouldn't release it because they said it's one thing to see it at a movie theater, but it's a different thing to see it in your own living room.
Hmm.
And so they wouldn't release it for like years and years, I think.
Do you remember
Um,
the original trailer?
yes, I do.
They yanked it because they said it
Yeah.
was too scary. So I went back
Well,
and
it
watched
is.
it, and I was like, "Oh
It gives
wow!"
you epilepsy. It like it is so because it has all those flashes and all
Right,
those. Yeah,
and
it
it's like
is
a
creepy
negative
scary.
image, like the black goes white, the white goes black, or whatever.
Yep.
Yeah, yeah, it's creepy.
Yeah, definitely. But it obviously added to the hype. I mean, it worked for him
Hmm.
because, like you said, one of the most profitable movies in history.
Hmm.
I love the story of it overall. I like the way the story evolves. I like the that whole opening, which kind of gives you a weird vibe, but you don't really know what's going on or why or who this old guy is in the dig and what's happening and da da da.
Yeah, is there a rat in the attic?
Yeah, then we suddenly
Yeah.
cut and we're in Georgetown and we have all that stuff with the mom and the movie and Regan and the rats, and it's not until things start getting weird. He intentionally picks things that would unnerve you. It's one thing to say, "Oh, my daughter's sick," or even to have her vomit in the toilet or something like that. But to have her come down to a dinner party and pee in the middle of the floor, you kind of go, "Okay, now I'm uncomfortable. I don't feel good."
Right. I love all that stuff in the beginning in the desert. A lot of people think it's boring, but I think it's very cool.
Oh, I do too.
Hmm.
The whole opening with, well, and I always end up talking about cinematography a lot, but I love that whole beginning when it starts out with the sun setting and the sun rising, and it's almost in black and white, and then it slowly all the blood red color comes into it, the sunrise kind of thing.
Yeah.
Um,
Although I would
un-
question who funded this massive excavation where there's like hundreds of people digging.
yeah,
I'm like, damn, that's a lot of people.
yeah. And an early key, but I was Raiders of the Lost Ark all over that one.
Oh
I was
yeah.
going, okay, they're about to get to they're about to to find the ark
The Holy
anytime
Grail.
now.
Yeah.
But I loved the whole beginning, and I loved the a trivia thing I found. The guy in the book, you find out this a lot more, but you don't in the movie. In fact, in the movie, they never say the demon's name, which I'm kind of a stickler for. If it's not in the movie, then it didn't really happen, kind of thing.
Hmm.
But in the book, the demon is Pazuzu, which was an actual ancient demon. He didn't make it up. It was an old demon, and it was the demon of the wind.
Hmm.
And I thought it was interesting when Father Marin dug out the figurine or whatever of Pazuzu. You see the wind and you hear the wind as he's pulling it out of the hole. I thought that was a cool little inside joke, I guess.
Hmm.
But to your point, I like the very ending. When he's standing there facing off against this statue, kind of thing. And it's that whole opening is really good. The crazy lady in the carriage who almost runs him down.
Hmm.
That's a really scary, like, little bit there. The one-eyed, weird or glassy-eyed blacksmith dude. All of that. And it's all done through Marin's POV. It's all through him.
And it all makes you feel uneasy, very similar to what you were talking about with the beginnings in Georgetown as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And gives this guy some kind of adversarial kind of feel to him. He's on a quest, obviously. It's a personal quest. It's something important to him. And he seems tired and weak. He seems like, oh my God, it's back, is the impression I got from the movie. Is I fought this once and now it's returned, or something like that was the feel of it.
Hmm.
I liked again, it's a very Raiders of the Lost Ark scene, but I liked the scene with him and whoever the other guy was in the room, one of the few scenes with dialogue in that whole opening, and the clock stops.
That's creepy.
Yeah. But the key right there I got, and I know we save keys for the end, but the key I got there was the Exorcist, was Evil Dead.
Evil Dead, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I knew you were going to say that.
But I also like the fact that the screenplay, Blatty's screenplay, almost allows for like little breathers at times, and then at other times it doesn't.
Hmm.
So like, this, you go from this standoff of him in the desert against this big statue of Pazuzu, and we dissolve from that into this big overhead shot going in on Georgetown. And it's nice and sweet and establishing and slow and everything, and then we go to so it sets everything up. Same thing with, we have a scare, and then we suddenly cut to the next scene, and it's a lengthy hallway at the church, and you're seeing Dyer walk down the hallway. So we get this kind of, okay, cool. But then later on, it's the opposite. He has all of these scenes that are together, and you think you're really getting into the meat of the scene, and then it suddenly cuts, and you're in a different scene, which throws you off, I think, pacing-wise, or just comfort level. Like, trying to remember, one of them was like when she's yelling at Carl about the rats. And he's going, there are no rats. And she's going, Carl, I heard them. So put out the traps and da-da-da. And she goes, no rats. And then we cut and we're in a different scene. And there's no end to the scene itself. There's no resolution.
Yeah. If you're getting ready to transgress into or transition into the cast, Um,
Oh yeah, 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 yeah. Let's do the
I
cast.
was going to, well, kind of a good segue is um, Max von Sydow, who plays Lancaster Merrill,
Hmm.
is based on an actual priest slash archaeologist named Lancaster Harding,
Okay.
who Blatty met in Beirut. Now, I don't know if he was in Beirut researching the novel or if this was just an early venture of his, but that's
Mm-hmm.
why his name is Lancaster, because that's an unusual first name.
Yeah.
But when you were talking about getting into Georgetown and Chris McNeil, the actress that Ellen Burstyn plays, the mother of Regan, the girl that's possessed, she is not very sympathetic at all to begin with. And I thought she was kind of cold, and I didn't like her very much. But that, of course, changes toward as the film progresses.
Interesting. I actually liked her relationship with Reagan a lot.
Hmm.
I thought their chemistry was really, really good. I think her chemistry with everyone else was off to me.
Well,
Yeah,
I mean,
she seemed
she's
like,
she's bossing servants around. She's got money, and I don't know. I
yeah.
just didn't find that very. I didn't
And on the
relate to
set,
that.
she's kind of like brushing people off,
Hmm.
and they're trying to help her with her makeup, and she's pushing them away. So yeah, she does come across as a little brusque, I think.
Yeah,
Um,
it changes. I mean, you feel
well, and
bad for her
people,
eventually.
if you're if you're talking about cast and casting it, or cast in general, the scene, one of the first scenes we see with Chris, she's getting ready to do her good to go on. She's shooting a movie, and she's getting ready to go and shoot her scene. And there's a guy talking to her. That guy is William Peter Blatty.
Right. He's
That's a
got like a
cameo kind of
70s
thing.
porn stash. Yeah.
Yes, he does. But there's that. Um, yeah. So, what about the casting? I thought overall the casting of this was great. I couldn't think of Max von Sydow, of course, was excellent. Um,
And
to
not very
find a
old.
no, he was 43, 44, I think,
Yeah, a lot of
when they
those
filmed
makeup
this,
effects were just aging him.
which deserved an Oscar, even though they didn't have a makeup Oscar at that time, but they should have given him one because there were people who didn't even there were people who said, "I thought Max von Sydow was always old." What?
Hmm.
Kind of thing. Um, I saw one quote that said there were times during the exorcism scene where Max von Sydow actually had more makeup than Linda Blair. So I thought that was kind of cool.
Hmm.
Um, but I thought Ellen Burstyn was a good casting. I thought to find a 12-year-old who would be able to do that part,
Uh-huh.
wow, they got really lucky.
Um,
And I liked Jason Miller as
I
Karras.
think he's great.
Yeah, because no matter what people say, this isn't a movie about Reagan. This is really the movie is about Karras.
Hmm.
I mean, he's the emotional center of this movie. We actually see him. I can't remember if it's before or around the same time that we actually meet Reagan. We see more of him walking around and talking to people and doing his gag than,
Interacting with his mother. Yeah.
yeah, with his mother and all of that stuff. And he's the one with the crisis of faith. He's the one that makes the ultimate sacrifice. All of that. It's basically his hero journey rather than Reagan's.
Yeah,
I mean,
she's
she's the
the
victim.
catalyst.
Hmm.
Right. I have a page of casting notes that I will try to pare down.
Okay.
Um,
For this movie?
yeah, I do. For the two smallest ones are Father
Hmm.
Marin. They wanted Brando for a while.
Bullshit.
Eh,
See, that would have been a huge mistake.
Well, and that's exactly what Friedkin said. He said if we cast Brando, it'll be a Brando movie, and that's all anybody will
Yep.
care about. So
Totally true.
they got that gone. And
Who wanted him? The studio?
I think so. I think so. It
Oh, okay.
wasn't Brando because Brando never really campaigned for anything. They went to him. He never went to them. But
Right.
but yeah, maybe so. And I think I read somewhere that Friedkin had Max von Sydow in mind immediately, so that never really got superseded.
Okay.
And then, as
Okay.
an aside, Sharon, the friend, or the contact she has in DC, that I guess is her assistant or whatever.
Yeah.
Jill
Her
Clayburgh
secretary.
auditioned for that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I'm surprised she didn't get it. That was just kind of odd to me.
Well, I think if he went with no names, then he has to keep it with mostly no names.
Hmm.
It would have been odd to see her opposite, Ellen,
Hmm.
probably.
Now, I have for the other three primaries, Regan, Father Karras, and Chris McNeil, I have
Yeah.
categorized them into people that either campaigned for the part, were considered for the part, or auditioned for the part. Would you like me to
Really, I
begin?
didn't. I didn't research any of this. This is cool. Okay, I'm curious to hear this.
Yeah, it's fascinating because people must have known this was going to be a big movie because they wanted in it. Um,
Well, the book was huge,
mhm,
so
right. So, people that um, were considered. All right, let's start with Chris McNeil. This is the Ellen Burstyn role. The
hmm
first two choices that the studio and Friedkin agreed on couldn't do it. Number one was Audrey Hepburn,
mm,
and she
okay.
she wouldn't do it unless they filmed it in Rome, which I thought was funny. That sounds like Chris McNeil, kind of at the beginning of
Well,
the film.
she was probably living there at the time. Didn't she move to Rome for
Yeah,
a while?
well, she's got
Yeah.
movies that were filmed there for sure. And the other was Anne Bancroft, and she was pregnant,
Hmm.
so she couldn't do it.
I could see either one of those. That's not a bad. That's not bad.
Yeah.
I could see either of those playing that role.
Okay.
Uh, d-
Uh,
yeah.
this one is the most crazy to me because it's a mother-daughter team. But Debbie Reynolds and Carrie Fisher.
Oh no, no,
I
no,
mean, I
no,
could see
no,
Carrie
no,
Fisher, but I cannot see Debbie Reynolds at all.
no.
She's like a comedic song and dance person, not drama.
Yeah, I could never see her going. Jesus Christ! What are you doing with my daughter?
Although she probably said it to Carrie a million times. Yeah. And then the two of the crazier ones that were considered to me were Jane Fonda and Barbara Streisand. Um,
Oh God, no.
Jane
Yeah, I
Fonda just
couldn't.
said no. She was like, I don't want to be in that movie. And Barbara Streisand
I'm
turned
having
it
enough
down.
trouble with the Vietnam War. I don't want to be in a horror
Well, and
movie. Yeah.
Friedkin even talked about that. He said it was during the middle of all her heyday with the Vietnam stuff, and she said she didn't want to be associated with that kind of film. I mean, she not
Yep.
because it was demonic, but because it was a horror movie. She just thought it was beneath her or something. And then Streisand,
Yeah.
probably the same reason would be my guess. She turned it down too.
Yeah.
Another person, the one person I had that campaigned for Chris was Shirley MacLaine.
Ugh.
And
Oh no.
she was kind of like Jodie Foster. She had even acquired the rights at one point and was gonna be in it.
Hmm.
And I don't know if she had a disagreement with Freakin' or what, but she ended up stepping away and she did that knockoff movie, The Possession of Joel Delaney. Do you remember that?
Oh my gosh, yeah.
So she
That's
made
one of my
a
that's in my
slight
key list. Yeah.
a slight error on her part. And then these are other people. Geraldine Page also campaigned for it, but she was turned down. Um, I think she might have been a little old. I'm not sure what her age was. But the other three I have, and the most surprising of these three, I think would have actually been pretty good, were Lee Remick, Carol Burnett, and Raquel Welch. I think Carol Burnett could have
Hmm.
done this. A lot of people
No.
would disagree,
No.
but I think she could
I
have
would
done it.
disagree. No. No, that's like no.
I don't
No.
know. I mean,
You
she can do
Julie
drama.
Andrews couldn't do it either. No. No.
Ooh,
No.
that's
No, no.
good.
Now Lee Remick But she went on to do
She
Omen.
went on to do
So
Omen.
there you go.
So there's your
She had
another
her own
key. Yeah,
demons.
exactly.
But interesting. I could see her doing it.
Okay.
Couldn't see Carol Burnett.
I'm
No.
gonna say
Who was the third one again?
Raquel Welch.
No.
No, not
No,
at
she
all.
has to go do Fantastic Voyage.
Well,
Yeah, she has to go do
she's
that.
kind of in the Jane Fonda category. She's too pretty, you know. Yeah.
Yeah. I
Um,
agree with that.
I'll do Reagan last because they're some of the funniest. So I'm going to move on to Father Karras, which is probably the biggest list. Considered were Gene Hackman, who had ties with Regan because of the French Connection.
Yeah, I don't know if he would have had the innocence to do it though. But
Right.
yeah.
Stacy Keach, Al Pacino.
Eh, Yeah, I could definitely see Pacino, except that would
Yeah.
make it a
Well,
comedy.
I'm about to give you a list of everybody who was popular in the 1970s. Dustin Hoffman, Warren Beatty, Burt Reynolds, Ryan
Oh no.
O'Neal, Peter Fonda, John Voight, Robert Blake, Christopher Walken, James Caan. Those are all people that were considered. So
By Friedkin or by the
I'm
studio? Do we know
assuming
the?
it's a. I never got confirmation on either. I'm assuming it's a
Okay,
mix of
okay.
both. Maybe I don't know. Um, the only two that campaigned for it were Jack Nicholson, and they said absolutely no. There is nothing innocent about him whatsoever.
No, no, not at all.
And Paul Newman, who I have a feeling was a little too old.
Mm,
He was
Probably not
45
by.
at the time. I did the math
Well,
this morning. Um, and he was playing opposite Redford then, and he was always playing the more mature in those movies. So he might have just not looked it at that time.
okay. Two things and pseudo keys here, but um, the first point is I think he's the male equivalent of what you just said about Raquel Welch. I think he's too good looking for that part.
Yeah, I could see that.
You know, but the second one is it would be interesting had he taken it because the Exorcist was nominated for Best Picture, but it lost out to The Sting, and The
Interesting.
Sting was Paul Newman.
That's great.
So it would have been interesting to see if he would have won, both roles or
And
been
that and,
nominated
and
for
The
two different
Sting
movies.
was a movie my mother took me to. I remember
I
going to
love
see
The
that movie.
Sting.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, George Roy Hill, that was a great movie.
Hmm.
That whole, Doyle Lanigan, that's who I liked. He was great.
Oh, and I forgot one. Alan Alda was offered but turned it down because he said he didn't like the book.
That makes sense. He's
Yeah.
more the comedy type
I am
anyway.
just not an
Yeah,
Alan Alda person. I think he would have annoyed me.
I do. Well, and I do. Yeah, I would agree with that. But I think I really like the fact that Friedkin went with a playwright actor too. I really liked that. I can't recall another instance of that
Mhm.
kind of thing.
Oh, and I have three more that I
Um,
forgot that were considered.
Keep going.
Roy
Yeah.
Scheider, Elliot Gould, and George Hamilton.
No.
George is too tan.
No.
I saw him on a show last night. He was on something I watched. Oh, Grace and Frankie. I was like, oh, he is still tan,
Well,
even
and
though he's
if
90.
if Scheider had taken it, he wouldn't have done Jaws probably. So no, we don't want him to do that
No, not at
kind of
all.
thing.
Right. Okay. And then the funny ones are, of course, Reagan, if you want to do those
Yeah.
really quickly. Sorry, I knew this was going to take a little while. That's why I had to do an extra page of notes. Um, I told you that Carrie Fisher was considered. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Jamie Lee was considered, Jamie Lee Curtis, but Janet would not
Mm-hmm.
let her audition.
Okay.
Maybe because she had been cast in a horror movie and typecast. I don't know. And Sharon Stone was
Mm.
considered as well. Um, the people that auditioned,
I'm
um,
sorry. You said Sharon Stone. The only thing I could think of was, well, she's very well known for her crotch, so she could have done this part
Oh wow, that's
very well.
great. It wouldn't have been the Basic Instinct wouldn't have been the first exposure to it either. Now that I think
Right. Right.
God Almighty, we're horrible. Okay, auditioned. Brooke Shields, too young. She was only 8.
Mm.
Laura Dern, too young. She was only 6.
Mm.
Kim Basinger, too old.
Yeah. Well,
And Melanie Griffith, who was the exact same age as Linda Blair.
interesting. I could have. That might have been an interesting choice
You want to know
to
who
do.
else was the same age as Blair that auditioned?
Oh no, who?
Eve Plum from the Brady Bunch.
Perfect. That would have just been perfect.
Satan, Satan, Satan. Um,
Yeah.
and then there's one other one little tad I'll add as a coda. For a long time, Dana Plato from Different Strokes said that
Mm-hmm.
she was supposed to do it. But apparently that was a rumor that she herself started. And I looked up her age. She was way too young. She would have been like 3 or something. I can't remember what it was. But anyway, I just found all those
Interesting.
very, very interesting and funny. So if you're familiar with
That
this
is
film,
really cool.
yeah.
I did not know a lot of that stuff. I mean, I knew some of the basics. I knew that Friedkin picked Jason Miller because he actually saw that championship season, which was Miller's play, and he had actually seen him and seen him. I think he was in the play, and
Is he related to Arthur
really
Miller?
liked him. That I don't
I
know.
don't
That might be
either.
something to look up, but I
That's
don't think
probably a
so.
big coincidence. That's my mind just jumping.
The other thing I had read was that Linda Blair's agency didn't even send her for the audition at all. It was her mother who actually heard about it and said, I'm going to put you up for this audition. And she talked to Friedkin and convinced him to have an audition,
Hmm.
which was interesting. I want my daughter to do that movie where she masturbates with a crucifix. I think she's perfect for that,
I
you
think
know.
I think at the time she was more of a model, wasn't she, than an
Yeah,
actress?
yeah, she had
Yeah.
done a lot of print work, a lot of modeling, and all of that. But it really worked. I mean, again, it's one of those. We read all these stories and research about all this, who wanted it, who auditioned for it, everything else, and you end up saying, well, you ended up getting the right thing.
Hmm.
It worked well. Because all the roles, the only role that I would say I didn't like in this entire movie, and that includes like Carl, the German handyman or whatever,
Hmm.
is Burke, the director. I did not like that actor in that part. I thought it was overplayed drunk and didn't like him and didn't like the 3 scenes he's in,
But it was
kind of
stereotypical
thing.
too, kind of.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he was that I'm a Jewish
Director
dickhead
jerk.
director and I'm
Yeah.
going to make fun of everybody and I always get my way and I can be as drunk as I want, that kind of
And
thing.
you do know he dropped dead after the movie film? Yeah.
Yes, my
He's
trivia says he is one of the 9 deaths associated with the curse of the
the
Exorcist.
curse of the Exorcist. Yeah,
Yes,
most people
yeah.
laugh at that. Um,
Well,
but hang on a sec. Before we leave casting, we need to mention one last thing.
oh yeah.
We've mentioned the cast, no, but we haven't really mentioned Mercedes McCambridge, who did the voice of the
Mm.
demon Pazuzu or slash Captain Howdy, which he
Uh-huh.
was also known as. And she, I don't really know that much about her. Do you?
She was a voice actress.
Mm-hmm.
She had done a bunch of stuff in the 50s and 60s. Um, she had done a couple of movies, but nothing really outstanding that I remember, I recall. I just remembered her name because I really thought the name was cool.
Mm-hmm.
Her name in
It's a
general.
literary. I mean,
Um,
it's literary. Or no, illiterate. Is that the word I'm looking for? Alliteration. Yeah,
yeah,
that's what it is.
and she was really she was just really I think she was maybe a 50s star or something.
All I
40s or
know about her is that
50s.
she was sober, but she started drinking again to do this because she
Well,
was
she came from. Okay, I'm just looking it up. She came from radio
makes
to
sense.
begin with. She was born in 1916, so she was big in the 30s and 40s in radio and television.
Yeah.
She won an Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress for All the King's Men in 1949.
Mm,
Orson Welles worked with her, so
okay.
there you go.
Well, and she was on the wagon or had been sober for years, but wanted to make her voice sound gravelly or something. And she said alcohol was the best thing. Of course, that could have been an excuse, but so she was drinking when she was doing it too.
Yeah, I read she said I want to eat raw eggs,
Yeah.
smoke cigarettes, and get off the wagon in
Yeah.
order to do this part.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was brilliant. I mean, I've got it later on in lines, but you've heard me quote it probably 2 dozen times or whatever, and I use it a lot. But that line, because it's also one of his cuts. So we're going from some nice little scene with Karis talking with Dyer or somebody like that, and then we cut and we just hear,
What an excellent day for an exorcism.
Hmm.
and it cuts to Regan all strapped to the bed and everything else. I was going, oh, it just gives me creeps every time I think about it. But great voice.
Yeah.
All the way through it. But he also, again, and I think another reason won sound editing, because they overlaid that voice too. It was her doing different interps of the line. It was other sounds with it. It was other voices with it, all intermixed to
Yeah.
give it that real demonic quality.
I am no one. I am no one. Hear the priest. Leo. Marin! Marin! Give us time. Fear the priest. I feel it is warm in the body. Give us time.
But yeah, very true. Mercedes McCambridge.
Oh, and I
Um,
probably should have done this during the casting, but I also have a list of directors that were tied to it as well. Do you know
well,
that?
they don't count because
Well, you know who?
well because didn't but Blatty picked Friedkin, right? I mean, he wanted William Friedkin because he saw French Connection.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
But did you
Well,
know
who were they
like,
considering before then?
well, number one was Hitchcock, but he was
Hmm.
getting old, and he didn't try to buy
Yeah.
the rights.
Okay.
Somebody that did want to do it, but I think they shied away from was Kubrick. Yeah, that would have been odd.
Yeah.
That would have been a little odd. And then the other two,
It would have taken years. He wouldn't have come out with it for like 5 or 6 years, probably.
yeah, it would have been
So
out in 1980.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And then the other two that were
Reagan
considered,
Reagan would be 22. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
that's okay. The other two that were considered before Friedkin were John Borman and Mark Rydell.
Ooh, I could see Borman do it.
Hmm.
That would be good. Rydell, no, but Borman would have been good.
Yeah.
I think Hitchcock would have been too cold for this movie. You know what I mean? This is a distant movie. I mean, as far as filmed in a kind of pseudo documentary style, but you really care about the characters in it. And Hitchcock tended to make you removed from his characters, except for his leading male.
Yeah, his movies were more about the movie than they were the characters.
Yes. Yeah, very well said.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm sure it was because I've got in my notes too that when Blatty first was trying to sell it, that every single studio turned it down. That they did not want to do it. Either they said it was too scary, too controversial, or it wouldn't make any money because it's a horror movie. And it wasn't until he could work out a deal with Warner that actually worked. And part of the deal was he wanted Friedkin. And they didn't really want to support it because, even though French Connection was really popular, they just didn't see Friedkin as a horror director, which worked, again, in their favor.
Oh yeah.
That's interesting. I hadn't thought of that before, but key-wise or whatever. But The same thing with Jonathan Demme. I mean, he was not a horror director, yet he directed one of the scariest movies.
Spielberg too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, but Spielberg was just starting, so that doesn't really count. He wasn't established as another kind of genre or whatever. But yeah, so obviously the best prestige horror movies are ones that are directed by people who aren't horror directors, like Kubrick or the rest of them. That's interesting.
I think they try to they think more about what scares them or what scares people.
Yeah.
Whereas horror directors are immersed in that world already.
Yeah. Like to your point of like your novel or Stephen King or whatever that is, making the things that every day scare you into scares that you can put into the film. I remember, I still am rewatching it. And you already said it in this podcast, but that tracking shot from the end of the hallway, just slowly going toward that door. And you're going, oh, no, don't, no, because I know what's behind there and I don't want to see it anymore. No. It's almost every time Chris went into that room, something horrific was happening.
Right. Which actually, ironically, is a Hitchcock technique, too.
Oh, yeah.
He wanted you to worry about what was behind the door.
Where to next? I have two different things. I have production elements, or just talking about the production in general, or special effects.
Well, effects is on my list, so I mean, and to me that's part of the production too. So, if you want,
okay.
You mentioned Dick Smith.
He's definitely one of the best for this, for all the special effects in it, from the puking the pea soup to the head turning to all the effects on Regan. He actually has done some of the best movies ever, regardless of makeup. He won an Oscar finally for Amadeus, but he also did Little Big Man.
Yeah, I was going to say, didn't he win for Little Big Man? Because that was amazing what he did in that movie.
Yeah, he did Little Big Man, and that's where he first developed latex bladders, or thin latex, which was used for aging, which was his big deal. You called him in when you wanted to age somebody, because I read this somewhere that somebody actually looked up Max von Sydow when he literally was 44 years old, and he looked just like Father Merrin. Because Smith would do this realistic, but Little Big Man, The Godfather, he did Brando and The Godfather and all the rest of the age makeup. He did Taxi Driver, Deer Hunter, and the one that I've got on here I circled for Tim was Scanners. He actually did Scanners.
Did he do? Oh, yeah, I guess he did.
Yeah.
That's hilarious. So we know he can make heads explode.
He developed, well, kind of to the point, good segue here and kind of a pseudo key. The scene where Sharon brings Father Karras up to Regan's bedroom without Chris, and she wants her to see it, and she pulls back the nightgown, and it's her stomach, and we slowly see "Help Me" carved, like blister up on her skin. He actually used acetate and some other chemicals and filmed it in reverse for that to work. And he also, in developing the stuff for Regan, and then later on developing it for Godfather, or Godfather first, then for this, he was actually the first person to develop squibs and bladders. So Rob Bottin later on took all the bladders to do like the howling and all that, but Dick Smith started that development with actually bladders that would pop with explosions for gunshots and for all of that. And I thought, Tom Savini must love this guy.
I know. I was going to say, who did Bonnie and Clyde? Because there was a lot of squibs in that movie.
But they weren't squibs. They were pulled gel. I read, I did. Oh, good. That's a good key. But I knew this from my, geekdom of wanting to be a makeup artist. They attached wires and cables and literally put the makeup on and then pulled them off to make the gunshots on people. They did the same thing with James Caan to begin with for Godfather, and it didn't work, and that's why Dick Smith developed the squibs.
Oh, good.
that
That's
would
cool.
actually blow out through his clothes and everything
So
else.
that's almost the
Uh,
birth of Squib then, was in The Godfather.
yeah. Oh, yeah. He's attributed with the birth of latex bladders and the birth of the
I'm talking
squibs.
about the
You know, like
movie
Ray.
though too. So that
Yeah.
movie's the one that was the precedent. That's wild. I didn't know that.
Yeah. Well, like Reagan's in the Exorcist. Reagan's the first time Kara sees her and her throat swells up and does that big,
I love that. Yeah.
thing. That's all a
So it's like
bladder,
a frog.
that he just inflated. Yeah, 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 yeah. But so the makeup in general, and the development of it
Hmm.
from the puppet that they used to make the head spin around, which is just scary.
Hmm.
Even though it makes no logical sense, it still is scary, and people still talk about it.
Hmm.
The um,
Well, did you know why they did that? It's because of the guy that they found his body with his head turned around. Was it the director?
yeah, Burke that
Right.
was killed.
She's
Yeah.
she's in
Hmm.
the book. She did that to mimic the fact that his head was turned around backwards. It wasn't supposed to go all the way around like it did in the movie. So there
Right.
was a reason for it. It just Smith took it a little too far, or Freakin did, one or the other.
Well, and I had learned that part of the reason Blatty put it in the book was because it was part of the records of the 49 exorcism, the actual exorcism. The boy turned his head 180 degrees.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
crazy. Hmm.
But overall special effects, aging Sydow, developing the harness. It was this weird, like, double harness, a tubing thing that would go into the actress's mouth to allow her to shoot the pea soup. And they used Eileen Dietz for that, was a stunt woman. So you do see Linda Blair in a couple of those cuts, but the actual vomit shot that comes from her mouth and hits Karis is actually an actress, a stunt woman named Eileen Dietz, that did that. And did you hear this? Did you find out about the story about that particular shot,
I
the
don't.
vomit shot?
Yeah, I did.
Oh, yeah, that they actually raised the contraption up, so to speak, and the pressure.
Hmm.
So it was supposed to hit him in the chest, but it ended up hitting him in the face. So that reaction's real.
Right. And then they filmed it again and ended up going with the one where he was so disgusted because it was the
Yeah,
best.
and
Yeah.
going, what the hell, God,
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, keep that. Which is a good segue a little bit, but Blatty used a lot of old school tricks and gimmicks on set
You
for the cast, from what I've
you mean
heard.
freaking?
Sorry, freaking.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like the Father Dyer guy at the very end, he's doing the last rites and couldn't get it right. And so Blatty literally physically slapped him to unnerve him
Hmm.
and make his hand shake and
Right.
all that.
Yeah, he was a little abusive.
Yeah, he would fire blanks on the set
Mhm.
to get reactions and jumps
Yeah,
from
he
people.
like deafened somebody in one ear. And then he also had Ellen Burstyn yanked so hard she practically broke her tailbone. Because
Yes,
he told her he was going to not do it. And then when she turned, he said something about do it harder to someone else. And she said that she saw
the
something, but
stunt guy. Yeah.
yeah. And sure as shit, you can tell she's hurting when that happens too.
Well, yeah, and I think I read that that's what she was really, really upset about was the fact that he kept that take
Hmm.
in the movie, because basically, for our dear listeners, for that scene, Regan is supposed to slap her mom, and she flies across the room. Well, to achieve that, they put the actress Ellen Burstyn into a harness, and three big burly guys off the set would pull and jerk her.
Hmm.
And they tried it a couple of times and it hurt her and she didn't like it. So she said, please do it softer. Freaking said, yeah. And then told the guy, jerk the shit out of her.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
And you can see she lands on her ass. And she went to the hospital for like a bruised coccyx or whatever that bone is.
Coccyx.
Yeah.
Coccyx.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And that scream and her reaching for her back are authentic. She's
Hmm.
really hurt in that shot. Yeah, he did that several times. I also read that the harness that Linda Blair had for the flailing scene, where she's just jumping up all over the bed and
Oh
being
yeah, slinging
thrown
her. I
around.
mean, just slinging
Yeah,
her.
that it became loose, and when she was saying it hurts, it hurts, it hurts. She was really meaning, I, Linda Blair, the actress, this is hurting me.
Yeah.
But they didn't know that, so they had kept filming. And they used those takes as well. I guess that's part of his documentarianism, you know. I'm getting the real effects
Right.
here. And speaking of which, I've got this in my notes, real effects. What, again, to me, what makes this movie work so well is every single effect in it is practical. There's no CGI, there's no computer, there's no help. Everything you see is what actually happened on the set.
And what I would consider like atmospheric effects, like the fact that that room is so cold they can see their breath in it, and
Yes.
and the fact that the bed moves, things like that, that are a little less extreme.
Well, and nowadays they would not, they would just animate in the breath. They wouldn't worry about it.
Hmm.
But instead, he brought in, a refrigerator guy who froze that entire set. And they said it sometimes it got to 30 below
Hmm.
in order to do it. But as soon as they put the actors in there and then turned the lights on, had all the crew in there, they could only film for like 10 minutes
Yeah.
before it would get too hot.
Yeah.
But that was cool. And I wrote down here, it's the exact opposite of Ready Player One. Because almost every single shot in Ready Player One has some kind of computer graphic animation in it.
Yay.
And this is the opposite. I mean, from the drawers opening, like you said, the bed. I didn't know until this that the actual bedroom set was actually on pneumatic wheels, so they could shake it. So, like when Karis and Father Merrin are falling because the
It
room
looks
is
like
shaking.
an earthquake. Yeah.
Right. I thought that was the old Star Trek trick. We'll just shake the camera and you guys fall.
Yeah, that's hilarious.
But it wasn't. They literally shook the whole room. They had guys pushing.
The camera goes
shook
one
the whole
way and the
room.
actor goes the other. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. So many effects that were practical. And I think that practicality really added to what made it scary.
Yeah, like the ceiling
Uh,
cracking. When
Yeah.
the stuff like that is what builds. That's what I was talking about earlier, as far as not using music so much to create suspense, but using things like the effects or the shot,
Yeah.
and that effect is really creepy. It's no rat in the
And
ceiling.
the bookcase, the whole chest of drawers coming across toward Chris,
Mhm.
and everything, all that's being pulled practically.
Mhm.
There's a great documentary out. I think it's called Fear of God.
Yeah, I watched
Or
it.
whatever, The Making of the Exorcist. And the guy even says in it that he got permission from Friedkin to film as long as he didn't film with audio. And so you see a lot of behind the scenes stuff that you would never see on another movie because he got access to
Hmm.
it, which was cool. But I guess the last one I have in effects and stuff, or actual effects, is everybody talks about, people ran from the theater and people were screaming or people got sick or dizzy or said it bothered them. And most of those complaints were not the exorcism. Most of those were the angiography scene,
Exactly.
the actual medical procedure. And the fact that they did it, he used real doctors and nurses in that scene, and used he used like a real hospital.
Actually, Linda
They
Blair's
didn't create
mother
that.
cameos as one of the nurses in that scene.
Really?
Yeah.
I did not know that.
Mhm.
That's cool. But yeah, I read that he used he used a real anesthesiologist, a real doctor in that scene, and for years after that, it was actually used as a training film
Yeah.
for other radiologists on how to do it. I also read something about the anesthesiologist was a killer or was something like that. Did you read that?
Yeah, one of the I can't remember which one it was. One of them ended up being a supposed serial killer. He got busted.
Yeah.
He got busted for one murder and like served 30 years, but he confessed to a bunch of others that they could never prove or something. And that's where the serial
Yeah,
part
see?
comes into play.
See, I'm adding that to the curse. It's just like Tutankhamun's tomb.
Yeah,
There was
I'm glad
the
you
curse of
mentioned
the
that. I
Exorcist.
forgot all about that.
Yeah,
And you were
so
saying that a lot of people were freaked out by the medicine and the science because that is something that any of us could have to come into contact with, as far as mortality. Another thing that, if you want to get back into the production and the special effects, what about the
Hmm.
crazy subliminal shit he was doing with the flashes of like the makeup test? You know that we know it was a makeup test that didn't pan out, but it was that scary
Hmm.
face from the commercial. Every once in a while, you'll just see it flash just so briefly. It's like almost like a subliminal suggestion.
Hmm.
And
Yeah, but I liked something I read where Freakin said, okay, if it was subliminal, you wouldn't see it.
you're
I didn't make it subliminal, but he did make it flashes. Yeah,
right.
like when Karis is having the dream and sees his mom at the in the subway or whatever, and you just see that big white face for a second.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and you
yeah, yeah,
see it
yeah, yeah.
again with Linda's face too. It flashes. Um,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I always thought that was kind of creepy. I remember Steve Rowe and I used to go back and like freeze frame it on the video just so we could look at it longer, to see what it
Well,
was.
and in the re-release, that director's cut kind of thing, he added more of those, and he added them almost ironically. It's almost like it's kind of like not ironically, but sort of like Hill House.
Hmm.
Like the scene where Chris comes in, she's coming back home, and the lights go out in the kitchen and everything. And she's coming up to find. She wants to know where Sharon is. This is after Burke has been killed. And she's coming back, and the lights go out in the kitchen. Then they come back on. She's asking about Carl, Sharon's anybody here? Da 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 da. Behind her, on the hood of the stove, you can see the white face. So it's one of those kind of added in that he added when he added the deleted
That's
scenes
weird.
too.
As far as
Uh huh.
production, my production notes, I don't have that many, but my favorite thing about this film is it looks like a gritty 1970s film, like all those films did back then. Whether it
Yeah,
be The French Connection or The Godfather, or you know what I'm saying? I mean, all those movies
yeah. They
just,
have a real flat like depth of field to
it's
them.
very real.
Yeah, very realistic, very kind of cinematography. They use those short throw lens or those short lenses, so everything was like in focus
Hmm.
all the way around. You didn't get a kind of depth of field thing.
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with that. I had just a few on production as far as part of, and these were really cool. This was a kind of a, a director's kind of best analysis thing. Freakin said that he intentionally edited sounds that would be really, really loud, and then the next scene is totally silent. Or he would go from something that the end of a scene that's really, really quiet to something really loud, like Regan screaming when they're putting her on the gurney, because he wanted the audio to be like he was doing the visual. And he said, you'll also notice that I also do a lot of really dark scenes and then really bright scenes. And so I wanted light and dark throughout the movie, just the way I wanted silence and loud.
Loud, quiet, loud.
And I thought, oh, wow, I hadn't thought of that. But there are scenes where it's just totally screaming, oh, mother, fuck me, whatever, all that, da, 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 and then boom. And there's literally no sound,
Yeah.
not a street sound, not nothing.
It
And it goes back and forth with that.
Some of my favorite music is that way. The Pixies are a band that are known for the loud, quiet, loud sound. They even have a
Mm-hmm.
documentary called that, I believe. And Nirvana went on to perfect it, and even the Foo Fighters now with Dave Grohl do it. But like, it smells like Teen Spirit is a perfect example where the chorus is real soft with like a soft bass line, and then when the
Mm-hmm.
chorus comes on, it's just full out shouting loud, and then it gets quiet again.
Yep.
Yeah. So it's
Yep.
not
That's a
just in
good.
visuals, it's in audio too. In music, I mean.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a technique.
Yeah. The other, I have like just three of these. The other one was, do you know who Hieronymus Bosch is, the painter?
I recognize the name.
Yeah, he does like the demons from hell kind of old Gothic paintings and stuff. It's like a really scary, twisted, dark, demonic stuff.
Okay.
Um,
I know Goya.
when,
Goya was similar, but I don't know.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, when Freakin was coaching Mercedes McCambridge, he said, "I want the demon's voice to sound like a Hieronymus Bosch painting.
Nice.
And I went, oh, that's pretty cool. That's good. That's good directing.
Keep away! The soul is mine!
He also said he was very gratuitous in the arrival shot, cinematography-wise, so production-wise. They took like 2 days to shoot the drive up in the cab and the street light and the shadow, the silhouette, the thing that became the big poster and the big image of The Exorcist. That shot with the light coming almost like from Regan's bedroom down, and the, Father Merrin's just in silhouette.
Yeah, it's iconic.
It took him like 2 days to light that scene because he wanted that particular shot just the way he wanted it. So I thought that was cool.
That sounds like Kubrick.
Yeah. Let's shoot that 78 times, And part of the makeup thing that I didn't have is at that time, and I knew from 79 and 80 and dealing with Evil Dead, they had sclerotic contact lenses, the ones that go in your eye and they literally cover up your whole eye. It's not just your iris. And so Blair had to wear those 2 or 3 times, for different shots where she had just the white eyes, like when she's floating over the bed.
Mm-hmm. I love that
or
scene.
when she turns and looks at Karis.
I mean, that's another great effect. Just her when she's levitating. That's an awesome effect.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they did that by the sclerotic lenses were like new at this time, and a lot of people, and they were extremely painful.
Mm-hmm.
So the only way Linda Blair could wear them was they had to actually put numbing stuff into her eyes to actually numb her whole eyes before they could even put the lenses in. And I was going, this 12-year-old girl just went through hell for this movie.
Mm-hmm. I had one more that I left out when we were talking about the grittiness of the 70s movies. One of my favorite shots in that movie is when Karis is in the subway and he sees that homeless man, and you get the flash of the light from the passing train on that guy's face. And that reminds me a little bit of those not subliminal flashes that he does later in the film too. The way
the cuts that he makes.
Yeah, like an echo effect.
Work. Yeah. Yeah, I liked that, and I think that set that up really well. I also I have a story about that. That that wasn't an actor. That really was a homeless person.
I'm not surprised.
That they had for that. But the story is they shot him, whatever his line is, that one, hey, Father, can you spare a dime for an old altar boy, or whatever, the line is. They shot it, did it, then like 2 or 3 weeks, I don't know how long, but a few weeks later, they realized the dubbing didn't work because the subway was so loud, and they had to go try to find the bum again so he could record his lines again.
Weird.
And so they had to go out in the street going, hey, have you seen this guy?
Well, and they frequent the same blocks. I mean, I lived in D.C. for a while, and I used to commute into the city, and I would see the same ones on each block as I did. So it's not surprising to me. My doctor was in Georgetown, so I know the city this movie was shot in, the area.
Hey, when I first took my first trip to D.C. to go see, going to D.C. to see all the monuments and everything, half of the school or whatever went over to the monuments, and I went to Georgetown's to that staircase.
Oh, yeah. Of course, everybody does.
I wanted to see. Yeah, I heard that the students, like from Georgetown and everything, were charging people to take pictures on the steps.
That and St. Elmo's Fire are like the 2 big movies that people think about Georgetown. Yeah.
There you go. That's a good key reference. That's all I had, other than he cut the scenes for that he didn't work. That's a production element. Oh no, they didn't have. Nowadays we have Steadicams and they use them all the time. Actually, you can get a Steadicam for your phone to do your little movies now. But back then they didn't. So a couple of the shots where they follow people up the staircase all the way to the door of the bedroom or whatever, and it feels like, the camera follows them all the way up. That was done with a special rig with the camera sitting like in a chair, and they would hang it from the ceiling, and riggers would actually, pull it up and around and spin it. That was actually done by rigging, not like somebody hand holding a camera. So that was kind of cool from a production element. The whole movie was cursed. The set burned down. Uh,
The documentary I watched said a lot of that's blown out of proportion. But yeah, the set did catch on fire. Yeah,
Correct.
but I'm
Yeah.
talking about the curse stuff.
Well, I mean, think about it. Fire destroyed part of the set. Both Ellen and Linda get hurt on the set. There was also another stuntman that got hurt at one point.
That's the director.
It's his fault, you think?
Yeah.
While they were filming, Jason Miller was actually at a restaurant or something like that, and a priest literally came up to him and gave him a St. Christopher medal and said, "You need this for your protection while you film this movie."
Uh,
So, see?
that's cool.
Yeah. Death threats against the 12-year-old. I mean, you already said that. So, and 9 people died. Of course, then I also saw this thing with Max von Sydow who said, we shot for 200 days. If you shoot for 200 days, bad things are going to happen
Yeah,
sooner or later. Just the odds
Yeah,
are
exactly.
you're going to have.
The odds are something bad's going to happen.
Yeah. So yeah, there's that. I agree.
I like if I know we're kind of getting toward the end and maybe some keys, but
Yeah.
I like how at the very end of the movie, and I did see the original ending, by the way. We can talk about that if you want. Um, the I love how at the end when Chris talks to Father, I can't remember his name, the real priest that's at the
Dyer?
yeah, Father Dyer, and
Mm-hmm.
Linda Blair's character Regan comes out to get in the car. They're leaving. It's the end of the movie.
Yep.
Yeah. There's always going to be that lingering, ooh, is there still something wrong with her? But then she kisses the priest. And I was like, that was
Mm-hmm.
William Friedkin's way, or Billy Friedkin's way of saying she's okay now.
She's cured.
Yeah. I mean, it gives you that moment of resolve that you need at the end of the movie to know, oh yeah, everything's okay now. Happy ending, whatever.
Yes.
You don't have a
I agree with
final
that.
fright or whatever, which is
No, please
so
not.
overdone.
No.
But
Yeah. Yep.
I like that touch a lot.
I thought that was really great. And the fact that, she doesn't remember
Mm-hmm.
anything, that sort of thing. Although they totally deny that in the sequels, but we're not even going to go there.
I remember that second sequel being really boring. I've only seen it
the one
like
with George
once.
C. Scott?
Yeah. And
Yeah.
it has
Yeah,
like
yeah.
nothing to do with the first movie or something. I don't know. It seemed like it was just really bad.
Yeah. Well, three I think was Heretic. That was the really the prequel kind of thing, sort of. But, yeah. Anyway, no, let's don't go there.
No, not at all. So you want to talk keys?
Well, let's finish up because you were on the very end.
Okay.
So there were 3 scenes that Friedkin cut from a production standpoint that
yeah.
he and Blatty actually didn't agree about.
Right.
And they ended up actually not being on speaking terms for a few years until the re-release, I guess, around, whenever, 2000 or whenever they did it. And he put them back in,
Mm-hmm.
along with all the more subliminals, quote, more ghosts, more faces and scares and all that.
Mm-hmm.
But the 3 scenes were an early medical exam that, was unnecessary. All 3 of them Friedkin thought were unnecessary. But an early medical exam that he didn't think was needed for dialogue, the spider walk, which everybody always talks about, and the ending,
Mm-hmm.
the conversation with the detective and the priest at the end.
Yeah.
And I've seen both versions, and I tend to go with Friedkin. I agree. I don't think the spider walk's a okay effect, but where it comes in the movie would have been so freaky that it would.
It is.
You would have
and
gone.
in all honesty,
what
it's
the
not that
hell?
real. I mean, to me, it looks a little fake. It looks
Yeah,
like
they
she's
speed it
floating
up.
above the stairs. It doesn't look like she's actually walking.
Right, because they've got her on wires.
Right.
Yeah. I totally agree with you. I think it was a right to cut it. It didn't work there. Now, in the book, and it's scary because she actually starts going around and she has the serpentine tongue and she's like licking Sharon and Chris's ankles.
I saw that scene.
Now that to me is creepy.
Yeah.
I like that
She
part. but the
corners
spider
Sharon.
walk
She
wasn't.
corners Sharon at the door, and Chris
Yeah.
is trying to pull her off. That scene's actually
Yeah.
in there. That part I didn't mind. It was the spider walk that I
I
thought
like
was,
that. I don't.
yeah,
Yeah, he could have just cut that. I would have been fine with her just coming up
like an
to her
animal.
and doing that.
Hmm.
Yeah, and it also kind of mirrors, early on in like the second scene you ever see her. Chris is chasing Regan and she knocks her down and starts tickling her. And in this one, she's knocking her down and trying to, keep
Keep
her
her
from
from getting Sharon.
licking,
Yeah,
licking her secretary's ankles,
I
I guess, or
guess.
whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then the one they really disagreed about was the ending because Blatty really felt it needed more of a happy ending kind of thing.
Mm.
And
No,
I totally
I do
disagree.
too.
I hate that scene.
I mean, I don't hate it, but it's not necessary. I think all the cuts Freaking made are fine. I think they should have been
Yeah.
that way.
Yep.
It's
I
almost
totally
like
agree.
a little coda to give Lee J. Cobb another scene,
Yeah. Yeah.
because he
Or
was
to
a big
say,
actor at the time.
Yeah.
And I just
Yeah.
didn't. I mean, and it's got the whole Casablanca thing where it's almost like they're
Reference,
kind of,
movie
yeah, it's
reference.
like they're mirroring, the end of Casablanca, and I'm like, this is not necessary.
Yeah. I agree.
Yeah.
Totally agree. And then, so what about keys? We've got to, do you have any outstanding keys or whatever? I'm sure.
I do. I have a few that precede it, but mostly are subsequent to it.
Okay.
Obviously, Rosemary's Baby came out a few years earlier, and
Yes.
that was a devil baby movie. It wasn't a devil. It was a devil child movie, so I guess you could say they were similar in that regard. But it was more about a pregnant woman.
Right.
And I also have Lisa and the Devil, which is a Mario Bava movie, but I can't remember what year it came out. If it was before or after, I may have to look that up real quick. Are you familiar with it?
I am not.
It has Telly Savalas in it. And it also was released under a different name later.
Yeah.
It came out in 1973, so it came out the same year as The Exorcist.
Okay.
It was only in Italy instead of, it was an Italian movie. So those are two that I had that were either prior or
At the same
at
time.
the same time. Now, I do have one that is much older. I'm not sure if you got this. I would be surprised if you didn't. Am I surprising you?
Yes. You are.
If you want to go back to Shakespeare, King Lear had a daughter named Regan, and she was evil.
Yes.
And I don't think that it's any accident that Blatty named this child Regan. I think that was
I agree
probably
with that.
done on purpose. So
Oh, yeah.
there's your Shakespearean
Yeah.
key right there.
Yeah. And I think prior keys too, the whole, like you said, this whole feel of the early 70s in his cinematography, he did all the way through this.
Hmm.
He went for a very, he didn't do the Polanski black and white kind of high contrast look. He did this very documentary, natural lighting look feel to it, which I think is a key to just the times of what he was doing.
And I lied. I have a few more, but go ahead.
No, you keep
I
going.
mean, I
You're good.
definitely have more subsequent ones. I forgot I had a few more early ones. They're not necessarily devil movies, but they're movies that have evil children. And
Like Children of the Damned.
right, Village of the Damned is one. Bad Seed is
Uh-huh.
obviously one. And
Oh,
The
yeah.
Innocents, which is a movie based on Turn of the Screw, which I think is what the next Haunting of Hill House series is going to be.
Haunted.
The Haunting
Yes.
series or whatever.
Yes.
Those kids, you never really know if they're evil or not. It's kind of ambiguous, but it's implied.
Mm-hmm.
It's implied for sure.
I had two priors that one was you already hinted at, but it was definitely the Hitchcock feel of some of those scenes, of some of the slow zooms, whether it's zooming in on a face or whether it's zooming in on the door,
Yeah.
especially. The other one was the effect they did when she grabs the psychiatrist by the crotch
Okay.
and he falls over in his chair. They do that whole
I
follow his face as he falls back, which is just like the fall in Psycho when he's going down the stairs. he stays in the foreground and the background comes rushing up to us,
It just
kind of
you're
thing.
right. You're absolutely right. But doesn't Sam do something like that in Evil Dead too? It seems like that's
Oh
in Evil
yeah,
Dead as well.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's in 2 or 3 shots with Ash and
Yeah.
Evil
Cool
Dead.
camera
Same
work. Really
thing.
cool
Yeah,
camera work. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. But almost too camera-y, I guess, or too showy kind of
Hmm.
thing. It looks odd where it is in the
Hmm.
movie. Which is okay because it's the only one really.
Hmm.
And we've done very good, by the way. We've done this entire episode of The Exorcist without mentioning or going off on any of the language that Linda Blair had to do,
Hmm.
or the scene that everybody thought would be cut that they wouldn't be able to do ever if you read the book, and then he actually does it in the movie, which is the big masturbation with the crucifix scene.
Right.
And your mother's so socks that smell or whatever.
Oh.
But that scene is so unnerving. And the documentary, if you guys would like to do it, look up that Fear of God documentary because they actually show how they filmed that scene. Because the close-ups of the actual crucifix making contact in blood and all that is not Linda Blair. That's the actual stunt double girl. But the other shots are with her raising the crucifix up, laying on the bed, all of that, and all the dialogue,
Right.
of course.
In all honesty, though,
So,
I mean, I know they always say, "Oh, she masturbates with the crucifix." It doesn't look like masturbation. It looks like she's stabbing herself, and it's more
yeah,
like
she's
genital
stabbing herself.
mutilation than masturbation. Yeah.
Yes, yes. And, and the fact that is not Mercedes McCambridge, that is Linda Blair with all the, all that dialogue in that sequence. So it's very unnerving,
Hmm.
but I think it established this, not a jump scare, but this unnerving pain horror shot. It might have even been the first key for torture porn, kind of stuff, because it's self-inflicted, it's Saw gore, but not in such an overt way. Does that make
Hmm.
sense? But that's kind of what I had. It is such a painful, uncomfortable, taboo kind of moment that you hadn't seen before, but you have seen in several movies since.
And even body horror, maybe, if you're going for just
Yeah, body
like
horror. Yeah,
aspects of
yeah,
horror. It's really hard to categorize the movie that way because the movie itself is a subgenre. I mean, it created a subgenre basically of satanic, evil movies or whatever, or possession movies. But yeah, as an element within the movie, yeah, I could see a little body horror going. You have the body horror with the help me on the stomach and the vomiting as well.
yep,
Yeah, and the
yeah,
head
yeah.
turning.
So maybe Cronenberg liked this movie.
Oh, I bet I could see that.
Yeah. So I have, you talked about the subgenre. I have just a list of freaking movies inspired by The Exorcist.
Oh yeah, me too. Me too. A whole bunch. We can spout a few if you want.
Okay, so I've got, for the same year almost, or within the 2 years of each other, you had Beyond the Door, which
Hmm.
was, you had The Omen, and you had The Sentinel.
Oh, I didn't get Sentinel.
Sentinel scared me to death. That's a good
Yeah,
scary movie.
yeah. I'm crossing mine off as you say them so that we don't
And
repeat.
I'm not sure. I may want to look it up. I think Dick Smith did the makeup for the Sentinel.
I think he
I
did
need
too.
to
There's
look
a
that
really
up.
old man with sclerotic contact lenses in it. I do remember that.
Yeah, and there's the whole backwards head thing crawling along the floor. The guy with his head bashed in. Yeah, yeah.
Uh-huh.
Okay. Anyway, so then in more modern times, I've got, of course, The Grudge, The Ring,
Hmm.
The Exorcism of Emily Rose, Possession of Joel Delaney. I've got that one. It was in there.
It was Alan Alda in that. Maybe
Yeah.
I'm wrong. I think he
What?
was. So they both ended up in a movie, even though they didn't end up in this one.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a,
The Possession. That
okay.
one. One with Anthony Hopkins, Silence of the Lamb, called The Right. And
Uh-huh.
I found it online, but I've never seen it. So that's
I
on my
haven't
list I've
either.
got to watch.
Yeah, I saw it, but I haven't seen it either.
Amityville Horror, of course.
Of course.
The Last Exorcism.
Yeah,
which
any
was
movie with the word exorcism in it. Yeah. I didn't even write them down. I was like, there's so many of them.
of course the Evil Dead because it's
Yeah.
demonic possession, and the one that my pièce de resistance for Tim is Demons by Dario Argento.
Yes. I know. That was like number one in all caps for me, man, was Demons.
I'm sure it was.
Yeah.
I'm sure it was. Now that
Smash
wasn't a
everything, smash everything, smash everything. That's another movie I can quote over and over again. Yeah, I love that
Yep.
movie.
Yep.
I have a few you didn't name.
Okay.
Two movies and one that's not a movie. The Beyond, which is Lucio Fulci, another Italian horror director.
Okay.
That was a demon movie. And Prince of Darkness, John Carpenter, was a movie about a demon crossing over from a different dimension.
Yeah, no, it was a big tube of scary stuff. Of light. And
But
then
there
it was
was
the
a,
bums that were scary and they were like the fog.
the
I
bombs were
didn't like
scary.
that movie at all. I did
There
not
was
like that
there
movie.
was a possessed girl in it too. Her face was coming off. It was all blurry.
Nuh-uh.
Yeah.
Really?
Hmm.
I forgot that.
There was.
That was not one of Carpenter's finest
Trust
albums.
me,
I'm
I am
just
an
saying.
authority.
Okay, I agree with you.
Okay.
I just didn't like it.
And then
But
one thing that you kind of referenced earlier, but is a very famous SNL skit with I believe Richard Pryor, where they did a spoof on The
yeah.
Exorcist, and it was Lorraine Newman in bed, and instead of saying your mother sucks cocks in hell, she says your mother sews socks that smell.
Yep.
And I remember that like the back of my hand. I saw that skit several times. I think it was on like maybe even a best of compilation at one time
Oh
too.
yeah.
Yeah. So that was a little bit of The Exorcist bleeding into pop culture at the time.
Mm-hmm. I had, of course, the whole opening, Raiders of the Lost Ark and The Mummy. Both of those with that archaeological dig kind of feel
Ancient Evil.
and
Hmm.
following the one, parkour guy running, the little kid running up to the guy going, we found something, Indy, here, quick,
Yeah.
come here. I had, the very first time we hear Tubular Bells is when Chris is walking home from the set and she's walking to her apartment or her house. And it was so Halloween to me because it
Yeah.
literally was Halloween and you saw the kids in masks,
Yeah,
but you
it's
also saw
fall. You can see leaves and stuff.
the
Yeah.
leaves blow. Yeah, the leaves blowing. You're hearing Tubular Bells. I was going, okay, that is so Halloween to
I'm
me.
surprised I didn't pick up
Um,
on that. That's very obvious. Yeah.
and Captain Howdy, to me, always referenced Jody, the piggy thing in Amityville.
Yeah, because
Her
it's
little
her
secret.
name for the demon, just like Jody was the name for the child pig for the
Right.
demon in Amityville.
And both the
Yes.
parents think it's an imaginary friend, not
Exactly.
a freaking demon.
That's a good one.
And then the only other one I had was, the Ouija board. It's a brief little quick scene in the movie. In the book, the Ouija board's a lot more important because it's really her conduit. In the book, it explains how Pazuzu found Regan, and that was through the Ouija board.
Well, and
But
it went on to spawn such spectacular movies as Witchboard with Tawny Katane. That great
yeah,
movie.
good movie. That was a good movie. Yeah.
I am joking, people.
And Ouija, isn't there one called Ouija, which is actually
There's a
about a Ouija
billion of
board?
them, I'm sure.
But so it kind of because I think it part of the hysteria that resulted after this movie and led to that what kind of was the taboo of a Ouija board. Mom suddenly said, "No, you can't have that at your slumber party," and "No, you can't. We're going to put that in the attic," or "No, we can't put it in the attic. There's rats." But we have to get rid of that Ouija board because it calls demons up
It
or
causes
whatever.
it causes young children to masturbate
Yes, and we know
because
that happens.
nothing else does at all. uh,
Did you? Two questions for you from a literary thing. Did it bother you that you didn't know how the demon picked Blair? That it suddenly went from Iraq to this little girl in Georgetown? Did that bother you in the movie?
I mean, no, it didn't bother me. And if I if I'm trying to connect it or make loose connections cohesive, you had mentioned that it was a demon of the wind and her window was open and the curtains blew, and I was like, oh well, she just was random.
Don't fear the Reaper. Yeah.
Right. That was the first window it decided to check out or something. I don't know. It didn't bother me, no.
Okay. And my second question, which kind of a final question kind of thing, was, did you have a Ouija board as a kid?
I did. I was always pissed because it never worked. I'm serious. I mean, you'd sit there with your hands on it, and I was like, when's it going to move? And it never did.
Did you do it by yourself, though? Because you have to have other people. Chris is right when she says, no, you have to have another person. You can't do a Ouija board by yourself.
No, I did. I did it with other people, too.
And it still didn't work?
Not unless somebody was doing it and trying to freak you out.
I guess I must have had more demons than you.
Maybe so.
I mean, I think it worked for me, kind of thing.
Maybe you're more manipulative.
Yeah, that's it. I didn't know
it. William Freakin'. You little William Freakin' trying to freak people out and getting real reactions. Out. Yeah.
Moving stuff with your mind. Moving stuff around.
Like a crazy person.
That's much too vulgar display of power, Carrie.
So, last thoughts. Any last thoughts about Exorcist?
I mean, we've covered a lot. It's a monument in the pantheon of horror, and like a lot of great horror films, it spawned its own subgenre because so many people identified with it or wanted to recreate it that very similar to like how we talked about Night of the Living Dead. I mean, there are still exorcism movies coming out now, and there are still zombie movies coming out. I think I pointed out that Walking Dead's doing another spinoff. And movies. The Walking Dead is like the modern equivalent to Star Trek. They're going to have 3 series and movies.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to digress, but
no. And we talked about this whole podcast is about the genre pieces that shaped our lives, and like I said at the beginning, I mean it definitely shaped mine. This was the scariest movie I've ever seen, and it still affected me just watching it again this week, and scenes of it that feel, evil, bad, taboo, scary. It's not just the craft of scaring; it's that I'm genuinely scared watching it. Going,
I'm genuinely scared of pea soup.
Yeah, well, I've never liked pea soup, and this just cemented the fact that you should never
gross,
have it.
Man.
It's just gross. Don't do it. Yeah. Cool. Well, that should do us for this week, unless you have any final thoughts or final observations.
I would just encourage anybody out there that had other thoughts that we may not have brought to light to contact us. Definitely drop us a line. Our emails are on the website, and by all means go out, and subscribe and like and rate us, because we need that to keep this thing going.
Yes.
We have a feeling there's a lot of people out there like us, and we hope you enjoy listening to us. We certainly enjoy doing it. So
yes. Thank you all for listening, and we'll see you next time on Johnny Has the Keys.
All right.
Tim,
Peace
talk
out.
to you soon.
All right.
All right.
You too, man. Bye.